Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, today we're reimagining youth empowerment, engagement, and thinking about how we can uh, envision the future to make student voice of every student a part of education in America. And to kind of outline our conversation, I wanted to start with some introductions. And as an icebreaker, I thought we can take a moment to think personally what type of learner we resonate with, how we learn best. And then I wanted to give just a brief history of student voice in educational reform. And then lastly, kind of hit on these three discussion topics: why traditional models fall short, how we can reimagine youth leadership in the future, and linking youth leadership to food and learning. Um, so, to start, we want us to think about what type of learner we are. Here's just a couple examples to get you started, but I want to give us a minute to think through it. And in 30 seconds, I'll provide some more framework. But first, I wanted us just kind of think organically without influence. How do you best learn? Like if you were to study for a test, what's your go-to methods to really ingrain that information in your head? So we'll take a minute. Here are some possible models if you're stumped, if you need a little support. Hey, feel free to take more time thinking through if you need, but I'll just start off. My name is Devin Monette. I work at Food Connects in Brattleboro, overseeing Harvest of the Month program. My background is as an educator. I spent 8 years teaching at the Kindle Farm School and a couple other schools where, yeah, I focused on agricultural education mostly. I use he, him pronouns. Um, in terms of how I learn, I think I am very much a hands-on experiential learner. And when I have something in front of me and I can actually like use uh, immersion and experience physically, I think that's best. But a close second is kind of writing through and thinking aloud. And that's often how I would like study for tests, is I would just kind of try to absorb the information and then from memory write it out and kind of speak to myself to, memorize and try to really ingrain that in my mind. So I'll pass it to Jenna.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Devin. I would say that I'm definitely a mix of a visual learner. I have a very visual, kind of photographic mind, especially when it came to studying for tests when I was younger. And also a kinesthetic learner, kinesthetic. I remember a lot in my harder classes in high school. I think about like biology. We acted out a lot of things, and then that really helped with memory. Um, and then I also really like the curiosity driven learner label. I feel like everyone would be a curiosity driven learner. And just kind of following your personal inquiry and diving into what you really love. So who doesn't love that? But yeah, I would say overall, visual is probably my strongest. So.
Thanks, Jenna. Uh, Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I think so. And hi, everybody. I've met some of you, but not all of you. I'm Liz Kenton, use she, her pronouns. I'm with University of Vermont Extension 4-H out of Brattleboro and serving statewide. I do STEM and agriculture, workforce development broadly. Why don't I pause? Jenna, do you want to introduce yourself?
I had a student who was talking to me and he went away, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm Jenna. I'm the librarian at Leland and Gray, and Devin and I just did a really great intensive together all about maple syrup process. Um, I use she, her pronouns. Am I missing anything else? I'm sorry. No. Okay, nice to meet you, Liz. I think I know everyone else here.
All right. Nice to meet you, Jenna. I might have been at a workshop that you and Jessa were on a couple years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as an attendee, doing exciting things up there. And I've met Grace. I'm supporting her committee with the Feast Summit. And Ellie or Eli, I'm looking forward to meeting you in a minute. Yeah. So as far as learning, yeah, curiosity, written, social. I mean, studying for a test is one thing, and learning something that I'm interested in myself and not being told I have to learn are different approaches, I think. And I know I still remember back in third grade, I did not understand why we had to do worksheets, and I had to be bribed with my book that the teacher would hold on to. And when I finished my worksheet, I would give her the worksheet and she would give me my book because I didn't see the point of it. But yeah, if I'm trying to gather information, I take notes as I'm in a conversation and I can remember it better. I can't do like podcasts and YouTube videos. I just don't really retain it. Yeah, all of this. And I'm really curious about opportunities for young people to find what they're interested in and pursue that. I think a lot of our educational model is here's what you're supposed to learn, um, and trying to make some bridges between those.
Thanks, Liz. Grace and Eli, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. My name is Eli. I'm a student at Leland and Gray. I'm a senior. And as far as my learning style, I would say I'm definitely experiential learner. I think it's one thing to talk about something in a classroom and um, look at statistics and stuff and look at facts. But it's another thing to actually experience something, have hands-on experience with it. I think that helps see it in a you see something more, you can apply it to yourself. You can also you just experience it. I think that's really important, and I think also probably just a curiosity driven learner. Like Jenna said, I think everyone is a curiosity driven learner. So there's stuff I'm passionate about, and I'm definitely driven to learn about those things.
Um, um, Hi, my name is Grace. I'm a junior here at Leland and Gray. I would definitely say a social and curiosity-driven learner. Um, just because it helps me like retain knowledge better, like through like memories and stuff. And I like going into rabbit holes. I think it's fun. Yeah.
So thanks. Jesso, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I know everybody here. And I am Jessa Harger. I'm the director of the Journey Away program here at Leland and Gray. Um, and I use she, her pronouns. Um, I am definitely an experiential and curiosity driven learner. And thinking about this, I think it's like thinking about how it's been a long time since I was in traditional school. So um, I've like come to know myself as an adult as a curiosity and experiential learner, and thinking about in high school and when that was or college, I suppose as well. Um, I think I didn't quite know that those were like legitimate ways to learn. And I think I have grown increasingly more confident because I'm an adult and have been able to like let experiential learning and curiosity driven learning lead the way. Um, and so I'm glad we're having this discussion and kind of cracking it open for these high school students in the room, but also just generally here in Vermont.
Thanks. Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of open with that question just because I think it evidences that there is a huge spectrum of how we learn, and that there's no one size fits all for absorbing information. Thought I'd just share this little stats that it's seems like just in terms of like the first three that 65% of people tend to be visual learners, 30% auditory learning, 5% kinesthetic. It was interesting to hear kind of our responses kind of countering that this pie chart, and that it seems like we have a lot of experiential learners, and but also just from hearing all of your responses, it didn't seem like anybody latched onto one type of learning solely as their means to taking in information. And I think that's really speaks to this notion that, yeah, there's no one size fits all for how we excel in learning, and that there needs to be more of a spectrum approach to think about how can we cross teach across different learning styles with any given lesson. So I'll keep this next part brief, but I just wanted to give us a quick rundown of educational reform to help kind of us to all land at the same point and just kind of understanding where education stands today. So I'll start back with in 1919, a man named John Dewey was an educator, a philosopher, a writer, published the book Democracy in Education. And this really empowered students, or it proposed that students need to have a voice in their learning and how they critically think, and that education should be a collaborative effort. That kind of led the way for democracy to kind of come into schools and for student voice to emerge. Before that time, we had schoolmasters and pupils, and it's very heavy in discipline and just kind of a more authoritative model. So John Dewey kind of led the way. In 1931, a student named Warren E. Shull from Oklahoma founded the National Association of Student Councils. This organization kind of unified student councils across the nation and laid a lot of the groundwork for youth empowerment and civic engagement. Then skipping ahead 30 or so years to 1965, a Supreme Court case, Tinker versus Des Moines. Mary Beth Tinker and her brother were two students in high school during the Vietnam War who wore black armbands to school one day and were suspended. And they filed a lawsuit with their families against the school, saying that it was a violation of their free speech. And the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. And this really kind of set a precedent that, yeah, free speech extends into the classroom, and that the same rights that we all have as citizens hold true in our schools. Then in 1983, A Nation at Risk was a report that was published by the National Commission on Excellence in Education. This marked like a major turning point in the trajectory of education, because it put a lot of pressure on schools to reform. And basically, it was kind of stating that our schools were not serving students, and that there needed to be drastic changes to increase proficiencies and to meet standards. That was kind of followed up in 2001 by the No Child Left Behind Act, which again kind of called for significant reform and put a lot of emphasis on testing and accountability measures to make sure that students met certain academic standards. But the kind of unintended consequences is that it really restricted a lot of the exploratory learning models that were actually helping a lot of students, even if it wasn't necessarily demonstrated in a test score. Any thoughts on this? I got just 3 more points. Jessa, I know you have a lot of experience in experiential education. Are there any points
Yeah.
that
Well, I mean, I'm not sure exactly where it falls on the timeline, but I also think about how public education in the United States was set up around this like human capital model of like replication and cranking out as much as you can. And I think that that's like started with the Industrial Revolution, right? It's sort of like how long can a child sit in a desk and learn how to sit still and take in information and follow the rules and sort of this education of obedience um, and like menial tasks. Um, so I think that kind of falls in there as well. I would say probably like John Dewey was kind of up against that model. I think that's a lot of what John Dewey was talking about, was trying to like, yes, and we can also do something a little bit more student centered and like, and that's been John Dewey is like my hero. So
Yeah, I was
that's my
gonna
main.
say, because when Devin was going over it, I was remembering a different, maybe it was part of this, but I remember learning in a education class in college about his idea of like the school as a social center. And I feel like for, the difficulties that we do deal with at our school, at least, we do offer some social services, and ways for students to connect outside of the classroom too. And I think, like Jessa said, as we move away from this kind of like factory banking model, we really have to focus on that more, like social connection and student empowerment. And I think you're right, Jessa, he was kind of ahead of the time back then. It's a bummer that we kind of got away from that.
And I'm going to add in, I think, about, looking over the past century of education. I work for 4-H now. I would not survive inside school walls, just, the way that structure is, but I've always been an informal educator, extended learning opportunities. But I think even 4-H, when it first started, was, outside the school system, but it was, I think, more training young people to join the agricultural workforce as they got older and through experiential education. But it was much more prescriptive, I think, when it started, of what kids are supposed to learn and how they're supposed to learn it. And now it's much more, there's, the language always changes. Right now, it's about kids finding their spark and just providing opportunities for, K through 12 to encounter a lot of different things and decide what they want to follow. And that could be, sewing or robotics or cows or whatever it might be. But I like the breadth of that. I also want to drop in the chat, Jenna, your comment about rural hubs, schools as community centers was really interesting. Some people have probably already familiar with this idea, but Vermont is working on these community schools. And the idea is like schools as the service and social center. And we're trying to offer things that are accessible to a lot more kids. Very often, the school is kind of the only place that everyone goes. And so that's the best way to reach the most kids. And I think it's built off of that. But there's more details in the article I dropped.
Thanks, Liz. I will throw in here a little tidbit just in Vermont's history. In 1964, the School for International Training was founded, which was a model for alternative schools, and is, yeah, very unique in the nation, and it's proud to say that that was founded here.
At the same time as SIT, the same time SIT was founded, the Putney School was also founded, and they were like I cannot think of his name, the guy who founded SIT. He lived where the Greenwood School campus currently is, and Putney School is on the next hillside over. And I love thinking about Vermont in that time. This was like 19, do you know the year? I don't know. Early, maybe around the 20s or something like that. I love the idea that it was like this hub of like John Dewey inspired people coming up with innovative new ways to do education that's very land-based right here in like this sweet little corner of Vermont.
And another thing about that same physical spot is the Greenwood and where SIT started. That was the original language training center for the Peace Corps in those years.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Good.
All right, last three here coming into the last decade. So yeah, these are more relevant to Vermont, but in 2016, the Vermont Agency of Education begins expanding personalized learning plans, which really kind of push for equity and more flexibility to offer students real world learning opportunities, and just kind of trying to build that more individualized trajectory for each student, so that there is some growth in the flexible model. And then in 2017, Flexible Pathways Initiative is launched, and that also kind of just gave students more of agency in their education, and just was kind of aimed at cultivating passion and trying to give a sense of ownership in how students engage with their learning. And then in 2020, we see a very big shift in with the pandemic, with schools shutting down and schools going to remote or hybrid learning models. It was kind of this real exposure just to how vital schools play in that social setting, and creating social emotional learning opportunities, but also just kind of a chance to re-envision how learning can happen, and creating new opportunities with virtual learning, and just trying to, flex around this societal challenge to created kind of some areas for growth as well. So as we kind of think through all of that history, I invite us to think about, where do we go from here? And to frame our conversation, I think we just kind of going to focus on these three areas. I'll try to, limit us to 10 minutes or so just talking about each. But I want to kind of just start off reflecting on the current student experience. And I'd love to hear from Eli and Grace, and just kind of hear what it's like to be a student now. But we all were students as well, and kind of just like calling back to that time in our lives, like what were some of the most memorable learning experiences that really inspired us? What were some instances where uh, it felt like there was, a misstep, and that like something could have been framed differently to create a greater opportunity? And I just would kind of love to hear what each of our experiences were like, and what our take is on kind of how much voice, how much agency a individual student has in their learning.
As far as like the as students now, I think in a perfect world, I think education is something where kids can find what they're curious about and then find their passions, and then that's what they go and do after high school. And I think the way our education system is set up, at least, it feels like, and unfortunately for me and Grace, we've both had experiences that have been absolutely amazing. I'm sure we can talk more about those coming up, but it feels a lot like you're checking boxes. You're just going through the motions. You kind of go to school every day. You take your classes at the end of the semester. You're done with that class. You just kind of forget about it. And I think for every student, I think it's really important that they find stuff that they're interested in. And I get a sense that a lot of students feel like they're just going to class to go to class, and not going there to learn. They're just going there to check off the box, say they got the credit, and then so they can eventually graduate. So
Yeah. I would say that every teacher definitely teaches a lot different. I think that's like difficult to be, like hands-on with like a history class, like, or something like that. And I always think back to there's someone I know who's from France, and she was saying how in her like high school career, then people got to like pick their pathways. And she was like in a school that was like specifically for like science and math, but like some people were like in like English and arts, and like they got to like pick that way and then like go really like in depth on it. And I just feel like, as Eli was saying, like I'm just like checking boxes with a lot of my classes right now. Like I don't really care, and I feel like it's really difficult because like a lot of teachers like don't care, and I like they've kind of like lost their passion. I find some teachers are like really good at like giving kids like kind of their own, like looking into their interests more. Like I have one teacher who I hate. I always hated English, and she was able to kind of like let us like pick our own like way, like giving us like I'm in her classroom right now. Um, but she was kind of able, like, she gave us a topic, but we were able to kind of like pick our own like way of like doing it. And I really like that because, I mean, I have much different interests than like a bunch of my classmates. And so finding a way to like, if we're going to have mandatory classes, making it fun for everyone and not just like a few people. Sorry, that was a little bit scattered, but yeah.
No, those are great thoughts. Yeah, really appreciate uh, the insight there. I think, yeah, the checking the boxes really resonates with me, and just the kind of both sides of it, like students feel like they have to earn so many credits, and that some of those credits are meaningless, and that they'll never, I remember hearing, I'm never going to use math. Why do I got to learn math? I'm never going to. And, you know, and then from a teacher's perspective, like they're not deciding the credits. They still have to deliver a curriculum that meets state standards and support students in hitting those proficiencies. So like both are kind of stuck in this forced model of checking the boxes and trying to just work to like get students graduated versus looking into kind of where interests lie and letting that steer an educational path.
Yeah, I think there's like as the director of a program that's really trying to break this model, or rather offer something that is a lot more experiential and opens up worldview. It's sort of like what Liz was saying earlier about finding the spark. If you don't have any exposure to anything but two sparks, and those aren't your sparks, right? Like to have opportunities to go out and see more of the world and figure out what some of those sparks might be, is really what this program that I've put together is all about. And I think that there's something that can happen in the classroom, and I see it here at Leland and Gray with particular teachers, that there's reticence among their students to learn about these things or wonder why they're learning about it, but it is giving them exposure that they aren't getting at home and aren't getting from the community, in part just because this is a really rural and homogenous community. And so I think that school can offer some of that, and I think so much of being a teenager is being sort of reticent to do things you don't want to do. And that's one of the greatest learnings teenagers can have, is how to do things they don't want to do, because that's part of being a human in this world. And I've been really inspired by some of the teachers here that are able to use the framework that exists that's pretty rigid and forces you to move really quickly, and you have to hit this benchmarks, and you have to get things done by this particular time, and you have 50 minutes to do so and no more. Well, 80 minutes here, but and it's been cool to see how that can happen in a traditional setting. Meanwhile, I would never be able to sit still for that whole day, and never have been able to sit still for the whole day. So I think also programs like the Journey Away program that gets kids out of the chair and out into the community is still incredibly valuable.
Yeah, thanks, Jessa. I'd agree. And it's amazing what you're doing and what you have done. I'm jealous. Um, I just dropped another link. So yeah, like I said, I'm a very visual and written language learner. So I just dropped another link in the chat with another article, but this is just more about Sparks and kind of how 4-H approaches that. Yeah, it's interesting looking back at the efforts that have been made in Vermont to broaden the choices that students have. Like I serve statewide and I don't get to meet everybody, but I talk with a lot of people from different schools and different SUs. And the diversity of adoption with proficiency stuff, with personal learning, like it looks different in every SU has been really interesting. Some places it's, that's project-based learning was already a pretty robust part of the school experience. And some places it was pretty new. And, I've had a teacher describe it as like, yeah, it's another form we have to fill out, but it didn't really change anything. So there's that whole breadth of, it's transformative model, or it's a new name for something they were already doing, or it just like didn't really make a difference. That whole breadth of it, I kind of try to focus on, yeah, what we can affect in our immediate sphere, but then these bigger projects keep coming along and you have to adapt to those at the same time. And I think I saw Jenna unmute, so I'll pipe down for a minute and hand over to you.
I was just looking at your links. Thank you for sending those. Yeah, I feel like I'm having similar thoughts to most of you, and it feels like I don't want to speak for students here because obviously I'm not a student at our school, but as a non-student, it definitely seems like things are very prescribed, which is unfortunate because even for such a small school, we do have a lot of, range of interests and skills and needs, and sometimes it feels like we're trying to do the exact same thing for everyone, even though it just fits for the few. Which, like Jessa said, is kind of unfortunate, or it is unfortunate to see. And so I think the more that we can have programs like Journeyway or the intensives, and like Grace and Eli said, not just checking off boxes every day when you go to class. And I don't know, I'm a big believer that it's actually not that hard to change it. Like the more authority and just like empowerment, I guess, you give the kids in your classes, it's less work for the teacher and the kids are way more involved. So I'm a little bummed that people are not jumping on board as much, because in my mind, the benefits are so great. So I'm hoping in the future that we have more of that, at least in our small corner of the world here. So.
I'm wanting to ask Grace and Eli a bit more of a specific question about Journey Away, because that has been a pretty significant part of your educational experience, your current, well, not your current this year, but even this year, right? And so I'm curious to hear what it's been like for you two to move through the Journey Away program over the years. Like thinking back, Grace, to your freshman year, Eli, your sophomore year, when we put together this trip to study climate disasters, followed by in the following year, putting together this Journey Away semester. And then this year, what you're doing. If you're able to see some of like how you've grown as like an agent of your own educational journey through having had these experiences.
Yeah, so me and my mom were actually talking about this, and I think that like after Journey Away, I kind of figured out like what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And like I feel like I felt like I was like definitely like being forced to like do a lot of this stuff, but now I'm kind of realizing like it doesn't need to be that way, and like I can like take control of like my own like pathway. Even though it's like really difficult. But it's just like sad to me that like a lot of people don't realize that they have control and like they can like take over, because I do think we have like amazing teachers and amazing opportunities, but like people just don't know like how to use them. But it just makes me sad that like I'm still being forced to like do stuff that I'm like, this isn't gonna help me, this isn't like benefiting me, like why am I here? So I think that journey way like changed like how I feel about a lot of stuff, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, I grew up in a very small Vermont town. I think it's true to Townsend. It's true to any rural town in the United States, any rural town, really, any in the United States. I'll just stay there. I'll stay in the United States. But that there's a certain culture of you grow up and you kind of go into your family's business, so you stay in the same spot, you generation after generation. And I kind of grew up around that. Um, and I think that the thing that going out and seeing the world, seeing different people, different places, different ideas, the thing it does for you is it teaches you that the world can be a classroom, and it makes you curious to say, I want to go other places now. I want to see different things. I know for me personally, I want to study abroad in college as much as I possibly can, just because I feel like I learn the most when I'm in some place that I'm not comfortable with, or some place that I'm unfamiliar with. And A lot of kids, especially in a town like Townsend or in a rural community like Vermont, they don't really get that exposure. And I think that journey away, the trips that we've done, the places we've gone have um, had that impact on me as far as just wanting to do things. I was writing something recently for a scholarship actually, and I was like, I just pointed out the fact that I have this dream. There's 197 recognized countries in the world, and I at some point in my life I want to travel to all 197 of them, and that's mostly because of Journey Way and the fact that I don't want to go to these places just because they're just to look at them, just to for the luxury or for to say I went there, but I want to go there to learn. I want to go there to see different things. And yeah.
Yeah. I think another thing is like it's made me like question a lot, I guess, about the education I'm getting. Like for example, like the Vietnam War, when we were in Vietnam and we went to the museum and like we learned about it that way, and then we're learning about it in the classroom. I'm like, I feel like we're talking about like different things here. Like, I feel like you guys are like, it's so sugar coated. And so I just feel like in Vermont, like, since we don't have a lot of exposure, then whatever we're told, then we follow that exactly. But it's like that initial opinion, like, may be different. Like, you need to get like multiple sides, like, to like actually find the truth. And yeah, I think that's something that everyone on Journey Away has definitely like taken away, that we all look at different perspectives.
Thanks so much. Those are really, really great insights. To me, that is a good segue kind of into thinking about our next topic, and just what I'm hearing there that resonates is the power of choice um, in education, and how equally deciding what you like and what you don't like can kind of help you navigate and select something that resonates with you and is going to be whether it's a career or just a passion or hobby, some way to enjoy and make learning fun, is this element of choice. And I think um, both of you, Eli and Grace, having had the time to go abroad and be immersed in a program that really values that, you have uh, a view that maybe not all students get, in that stepping outside of your comfort zone into this element where you can see sometimes counteracting arguments or two sides of a topic kind of displayed. You have this ability to kind of then take that experience back and understand that choice exists in any part of education, and that we have choice. And I think that kind of what I'm getting at is that I think that a lot of folks don't necessarily understand their own ownership or their own role in their education, and thus they never really advocate for another choice or for something else. There's like a very uh there's these bumpers in our mentality growing up until we are told elsewise. These like safeguards that like you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to get an A, and you have to graduate with, certain amount of credits, and until we see elsewise that maybe, I can take a class that is not necessarily going towards my graduation, but provides a huge wealth of experience that will carry me in so many other aspects of my life. I feel like until you see that, it's hard for a lot of students to get their own voice and to advocate for themselves to kind of direct their pathway. And I think that to me is emerging as like a real theme, and just like advocacy and choice to make concerted efforts to steer our own education. Um, so if we're thinking that through to, how can we give voice to students who maybe haven't had that experience yet to understand the options that exist in education? How can we kind of start from the ground up to envision where there can be small seeds planted for students to start to understand their role in shaping their own education, and thus, create kind of momentum in building bigger programmatic shifts that bring about more programs like Journey Away and time in experiential learning, and time that's maybe outside of just checking off the boxes. Yeah, I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts. I think it's always important to try to shape our conversation to think of every student and think of like who, how might the shyest, most quietest student start their path to taking ownership of their own education? Or like what are like the inlets for somebody to start to kind of shift and realize that, oh, if I, maybe ask or advocate for a special project, then I have a chance to explore something that I'm interested in versus just like doing what's assigned to me. Um, yeah, so does anybody have any thoughts on kind of any of the
So
ground? Yeah.
yeah, I think I came to Leland and Gray from a very progressive school that students would choose to come there so they could do project-based learning in a um, pretty real way, both in the classroom and out of the classroom. And coming to Leland and Gray, that's a much more traditional school. Um, I think it surprised me um, how reticent students were at first to take the lead. And I'm not a traditional teacher. I very much am a non-formal extended learning opportunity kind of educator. Um, and so I know that my approach is looks a lot more laissez-faire. And I was sort of surprised that there was a passivity among students. And this is Grace and Eli when they were young, right? And so they're over time and like pretty quickly within the first year, you could see them starting to take more advantage of the design of their own education opportunities more and more, right? But at first it was sort of like, wait, you're the teacher, you're supposed to be telling me what we're doing. And I'm like, no, I want to know what you guys want to do. And so I think that has to be part of it, right? Like it's one thing to come with like great dreams and vision, and then like you come into a system where it's like brand new. It's sort of like the Pope, right? Pope Francis. He like radicalized things over the past 12 years, but maybe nothing really changed, but maybe he set the tone for something new. I don't know. We're not talking about the Pope.
I think setting the tone is a big part of it. And Jess and I started the same year, so we've only been here for 3 years. But I feel that in those 3 years, students have really been more open to jumping into new things. And like, I know we keep talking about Journey Away, but I think that was a really great model of showing kids like, hey, you do have voice and you have choice, and like we actually believe in you and like as a person, not just like some random student in the hallway. Um, so I think, I don't know, looking towards the future, just continuing to model that. But I also think that comes down to the teachers and how we're mentoring the kids and kind of how we're approaching those types of conversations. I think like how we started this meeting, the different learning styles, a really easy way to do that is like with assessments, offering different creative outlets for each of those learning styles to show kids like, I see you. I see that you express your knowledge in a different way, like pretty easy to do with what we have. But then kind of a future dream is have more capstone projects, maybe. I'm pointing to my PLP binders back there. The personalized learning plans, honestly, portfolios. I don't really know what that will look like because not to throw us under the bus, but we're just starting that this year. So we'll see, but I don't know. I've been really impressed and I don't think about it a lot, but how positive our growth has been with kids jumping into stuff. And I think the more that we model that, the more that will just become part of our culture and maybe just education in the state in general.
And I think coming from, again, outside the school environment, that ongoing relationships and redefining success might be some really powerful ingredients for making room for young people to make choices. I think I'm thinking about specifically the Feast Summit and the Agritech Conference, which are two different youth-led gatherings that I'm working on with young people this year. One thing that we talk about sometimes as the adult support committee is balancing giving the reins over to the young people and making sure that they're making something that they're proud of, even though it's something they've never done before. And they may not know the pitfalls that can come up where those of us who've done it 25 times would know, like, here's the checklist. And so balancing, like, leaving room for difference or mistakes or new experiences, but also not just being like, yeah, you got it, and just like sending them off into a swamp. But I think something about redefining success, like how does in 4-H you do a project and you can come back to it again and again, and there are ongoing relationships with safe caring adults who have expertise but leave a lot of room for the kids. So if you get no ribbons or no points, or if you get a white ribbon instead of a blue ribbon, you can do that same project again. You get feedback about what worked and what didn't, what are the suggestions, like what you did well, what to pay attention to. I think that's one place where there's room to encourage kids to speak up and try things, because it's not one shot, you get the grade, you did it well or you didn't do it well, and that defines the outcome of your effort on a project. And I think ongoing relationships with the work, with the topic, with the adults who have the expertise can help with kind of a long-term development of an idea. So it's not one shot and you're getting judged for it, and then you, like the students were saying, you move on, forget about it, because it only mattered until you got the test, and then you move on to the next thing that they're telling you to learn. So following kids' interests with that. I think also there's a lot of room for modeling and learning alongside people who already know how to do something. And given our current situation, if you got 30 kids in a classroom and one teacher, it's really tricky. Like if it's writing, that's something you can't really learn alongside somebody. So I'm thinking of more hands-on things, gardening and cooking and farm work and electrical and carpentry and all these great things that are life skills, fixing your own car and sewing and things we need to do, and how much room there is for working alongside someone to do something useful. I was thinking back on that learning style slide, and one that I didn't see there, but it came up on my mind, was a purpose-driven learner. If there's something that needs doing, then I'm very motivated to learn how to do it. And depending on what it is, I might, watch some YouTube videos or ask some experts or find a manual and just learn how to do it. And so topics that are authentically valuable will light someone up to really bite into it. And if they care about why they're learning it and that they want to do something and therefore they have to learn how to do it well, I think can be pretty motivating. And, we often get into these big, like, we're going to change the whole system, these big visioning conversations. And it's so tantalizing of like what could be. And there are great moments within the system that we do have for role modeling, for hands-on learning, for choosing your own path. And yeah, it'd be great if we can see more of that. I think one specific thing we could do is offer pre-tech experiences a lot earlier. The tech schools in Vermont are for 11th and 12th graders at this point, and that's not a lot of time to become an expert in something. And really, grade school, middle school, early high school, there's age appropriate things you can do in any topic to move your body and bleed off that energy. And then you can sit in a classroom comfortably and kind of alternate those learning modes and connect with the community to get useful things done, to make contributions, to meet people who are going to be your neighbors. There's opportunities for all of that, I think. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Heard a lot of great stuff there. I think we framed out kind of something that, really speaks to the void that, students feeling a certain amount of passivity in their own education and just kind of taking a back seat as to what they would like to learn, and how, as educators, we can hopefully instill our belief in students and encourage them to take on challenges that lend themselves to failure, and with that, kind of redefining what success looks like, not not putting the letter grade at the end of the course as like the only determination of how somebody did, but looking at all the steps that go in between to really encourage the process and the journey for students, so that hopefully they can understand that in taking an active role in that, they are doing the meat of the work and the really important stuff. And really addressing lots of different learning styles throughout that, so that we speak to as many people as possible in many different ways that people absorb information.
I'm curious if Grace and Eli might share just a sentence or two about like what would your dream high school experience look like? Like if you guys could like redesign it for everybody, not just for you, right? Thinking about your classmates and all that. What would you do?
My dream would be that like all of my teachers are like passionate and like want to teach, and are honestly kind of just like nerds about the subject. I think that some teachers like teach classes where I'm like, what are you like doing here? Like, but like there's some teachers that, like started teaching and then they just fell out of love with the subject. I think that every teacher should be passionate, and I think one of the ways that we can help that is like treat the teachers right. Like the administration should be doing stuff to like treat them right and like getting paid good. Students shouldn't be mean to them, like, that sort of thing. I think that classes, there should be less like required classes and a little bit more like options, which I am in a small school, so there's that part of it. I'd also say classrooms that are like inviting and like just like not like depressing. Like specifically science classrooms, like I cannot learn in because you're sitting on a stool on like these like hard tables and it's just like fluorescent lights or it's just like dark. And so I think like something that makes it like nice to like be in an environment, because I can't learn in a bad environment. So
Yeah, shortly, I would say I would ideal high school experience for me would be where I'm around students who are passionate about learning. I think that I go to school a lot of the time and I don't feel like my peers, majority of my peers don't. I just they just don't feel like they're excited to learn. And they, of course, they don't have to want to be excited to learn about the same stuff as me. But if they're just excited to learn in general, that's a much more enriching environment than it is just to go to school and you have kids that are kind of just there because they're required to be there. And I think that the way the system's set up, that perpetuates that kind of idea that that I'm not really excited about this. Why am I here? Yeah. So I think that a system that encourages students to follow their passions and also encourages kind of the idea that I'm actually excited to go to school. I'm actually excited to learn something. That would be much better environment than it currently is. So.
yeah, I really wish I had, like, right now I don't really have any friends because all of them have like left Leland and Gray to go and try and get some better opportunities, and I'm kind of like the last of my friend group that's here. Um, it's just like sad because it's like I don't have friends, but I also like don't want to be friends with many people here because like I feel like a lot of them like are just unpassionate and aren't really like into the same thing as me. So
Well, I think they're passionate. It's just they haven't been encouraged to follow that passion that
yeah.
much.
Mm-hmm.
I think every person has a passion, and every person can be passionate about something.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's a lot of encouragement to follow that passion or
Yeah.
to be excited about it.
Yeah.
Well said. So yeah, respect time and kind of wrap up here. But thanks so much, Sheila and Grace. That's very well put, and I think that that kind of speaks to the core of it, in that passion drives learning. Passion motivates us to learn, and that we don't know what we're passionate about unless we try lots of things and have a flexible mindset to kind of think about where we want to go in life. And I just, yeah, plug in farm to school and kind of food systems education as a avenue that promotes that style of learning. And as Liz and I were talking kind of at the beginning, you know, stepping into a garden or going outside and, working with food or meeting the community around you, that all, falls into farmer school programming and so much more as well. And just this bigger idea of experiential education is kind of around the work that I'm, putting together and trying to support in Vermont. And I really feel lucky to be able to work with schools like Leland and Gray that have values of project-based learning and trying to support students in, pursuing what they feel passionate about. And there's still a lot of work to be done. I wanted to share just two quotes. One was from our Maple project, our Maple intensive that Jen and I led. And one student said, I feel like programs like this trigger layers of inspiration in future jobs or through art. It creates a new atmosphere in which creates new brilliant ideas. And I thought that just spoke really well to the idea that a certain experience doesn't necessarily mean that you are learning to go in that direction. That an experience can teach you so much about life in general, and maybe about what you don't like, what, maybe you find a little niche in that experience that then opens up a whole new door. And then lastly, I'll end with one of my favorite quotes. I've never let my schooling interfere with my education, by Mark Twain. And that I just feel like is really important for everybody to always return to, and just understanding that school is one small part of education, and that we all need to own our education throughout our whole lives. I'm still a student, even though I'm not in school. I hope to keep learning until the day that I leave this earth, and I think that is something that all of us as a community, as students, need to kind of embody, and just understanding that we are in charge of what we want to learn, and our time in school is a very small portion of our education. Does anybody else have any last closing thoughts?
I have once again spammed the chat with just a link. There's a monthly conversation about farm to school and food systems education in Vermont that anybody is welcome to join. It started out for farm to school coordinators, but teachers, state coordinators, farmers, parents, and especially students everybody's welcome. And it's just kind of what's going on in your food systems work or education or experiences, and swapping resources, making introductions. It's kind of a friendly small group. But just putting out that invitation, and Jess, I'm pretty sure you're already on the listserv. So she's got that link if you need it. And if anybody wants to attend and spread the word, like anybody's welcome to drop in.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Devin, for hosting this and having Grace and Eli share some of their thoughts too. It's good to hear from you too. Thanks for speaking up.
Yeah, I really want to thank you, Grace and Eli. That's the most insightful contributions that we can take from this is hearing from those who are actively students, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and talk.
You're welcome, and thank you for letting us be on here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, everybody. Well, let's say goodbye. Really appreciate all of your time.